Sure. Good afternoon or good morning, everybody, depending on where you're at. My name is Mike Sturdivant. I'm the Deputy Chief at the Danbury Police Department. I've been here for about 30 years now, and I guess I'll just turn it over. We'll get to know each other a little more as we progress.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shaun, and I was Deputy Chief before, and now he has the job, and which is all relative to what we're going to talk about today. And I've been in police work for 40 years now.
Pete Elsty, been with Danbury Police Department for 22 years and formerly NYPD for 4 years, so 26 years law enforcement.
Thanks, guys. Usually when we talk about this, we get started with Shaun. So Shaun, I would love for us to start with you like we always do, please. And I'll have you take it away, buddy.
So I'll start like I always do. I'm Shaun, and I'm an alcoholic. And this is about my journey to recovery. So I'll tell you a bit about my background, but it all started with me showing up here drunk for work in 2014, and Mike's gonna address that as he dealt with that. But anyway, I am a good Irish Catholic kid, one of 9 from New York City. I grew up in with a horrible father. There's just no other way to put it. He was a child abuser, he was a wife beater, and he was an alcoholic, and just not a role model. I'm a police officer because my grandfather on my mother's side was a police officer, and he was a great role model, and I'm grateful that I had him available. But anyway, so I grew up, it was a pretty rough childhood. I was the oldest son. I could never measure up to whatever my father wanted. He used to beat me pretty regularly. He had a very violent temper. He took a lot of stuff out on me. Over the years, I wound up going to the hospital a couple of times because of it. We had to have the cops at our house. I don't think I need to get into a ton of details, but that was, now in retrospect that I'm in recovery, those are things I look back on, and they helped me in this job that I do today. But it was a rough childhood. I had no self-esteem whatsoever. Never thought I was going to amount to anything. Eventually, we went off to live with my grandmother on my father's side, and she was a much better person, but also very strict and used to, hit us a lot. I was, like I said, one of 9 children. Eventually, my mom, who was living with us, suffered a mental breakdown 2 days before Christmas in like 1969, when I was like 11 years old. And she wound up going to a mental hospital for 4 years. And she was followed a few years later by my younger brother, Jimmy, who was directly behind me in the chain. And he spent some time there. Eventually, Jimmy and I ran away from home because we couldn't take the abuse anymore. And when my mom got released from the hospital, we went and lived with her in Brooklyn. And that wasn't really good for us, because we went from having 24/7 discipline where we couldn't get away with anything or do anything to having practically no discipline where we were running wild on the streets. So getting regularly into trouble. My mom eventually went to court, and they decided to give her back custody of all 9 of us. We'd been living in a little bungalow in New York City that had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and my parents would sleep on the living room couch, and that's the house that the 9 of us with my mom moved back into. And then we all started getting in trouble. We weren't going to school. We were fighting a lot. The cops were showing up a lot. So I was lucky enough that a distant relative ran a residence for homeless boys. He offered me an opportunity to go. I was told that he was either that or the juvenile officer was going to be coming and paying me a visit because I wasn't going to school. So I went up there, and that's when life started to get better. They were really wonderful people. Dan and Ann were their names, and they ran a place called Boys Lane in upstate New York. And I spent the next 3.5 years there, graduated from high school. I think I was in a much better place because they were the opposite. They told me I could be whatever I wanted to be. which up until that point, I just didn't think I was ever going to amount to anything based on what my father had told me my whole life. So when I got out of Boys Land, I went into the Navy, and then I did my 4 years in the service, and I came home. Wound up that Boys Land had closed, so I moved back in with my grandmother that I previously lived with as a child, and then my brother Danny, who had come to live with me at Boys Land, was now living with my grandmother, and then dear old dad had showed up that there was an apartment fire. So, and just a short point is Danny was about 17 years old in high school, and he had been caught with marijuana back in the days when marijuana was a mortal sin to be involved with, and he got suspended from school, and my grandmother nearly had a heart attack. And I was home from the Navy going to college and working at night. When I came home that night, and my father was there, and he went on a rant about, he wanted to know everybody, because I told my grandmother, look, Danny's not the only one in this family that has ever smoked pot. I was trying to mitigate it. I don't think I really helped do that. And then my father said, you're gonna tell me everybody, or I'm gonna beat it out of you. And that's the first time I ever stood up to my father, and I said, I'm gonna tell you right now, you'll never, ever lay a hand on me again. Those days are long over. I said, Graham, please don't have a heart attack. I said, and my brother Danny had become Hercules and working out, and I said, if Danny gets up off the couch, he's gonna kill you. So I'll make this easy. I'll move out. I'll get an apartment. I'll take Danny with me. That's what I did. I wound up moving out pretty much the next day, found a place. A couple of months later, found an apartment, took my brother with me. He was a challenge because he was 17 years old. Now he had his own place. So we didn't quite hit it off, but anyway, life went on, and I eventually stopped going to school, started working full time to make ends meet. And eventually in 1984, I was hired by the NYPD, and I worked with them in the Housing Bureau for about 6 years before I transferred to Connecticut to this department where I am now. So life was pretty good. You know, I was partying a lot, but I was surviving. I was doing fine. And then I met a woman, and in 1990, we got married, and like I said, we were living here. Loved this job here. Everything was going well. Moved up the ranks to sergeant and then lieutenant. And then in 2003, my wife decided she wanted to get a divorce and be with my best friend. And I was kind of thrown into some chaos there. So now for about the next 10 years, I'm trying to raise 3 children. I'm working full time. I had met a lovely lady that we got very close, had a great relationship, but as time went on, I started to get deeper and deeper into debt. And eventually I got to the point where I went to see an attorney because I had bought my girlfriend's condo to help her out, but she wasn't paying the bills. So I was in a bad place. Meanwhile, here at work, I was doing CIT, I was doing peer support, I was doing a lot of good stuff for the department, but I didn't know how to help myself. I didn't realize I needed help. I was never a big drinker, but in 2011, when I'd seen the attorney, she said, you're gonna have to declare bankruptcy, which devastated me because I thought that that was going deep down into the hole again, that I would have to declare bankruptcy. But I did. It was the only way to survive. I had to go through that. But as a result of my embarrassment and shame with that, I started drinking, and I didn't think of it as any big deal. A couple of glasses of wine with the girlfriend at night when I would get home from work, and a couple of glasses of wine turned into a couple of bottles of wine. And then it got to the point where we're drinking wine at night, but if I got home from work before she did, I was drinking whiskey, 7 and 7s, or vodka and tonic, whatever. And again, never thought that I had a problem. I couldn't see it. And I think that's a big thing, that we can see it in everybody else, but we can't see it in ourselves. And I would ask my girlfriend, hey, listen, I'm getting a little concerned about our drinking. Do you think I might have a problem? Because again, for me, that would be devastating to have to become an alcoholic, because I swore I would never be like my father. I would never be a child abuser. I would never be a wife beater, and I would never be an alcoholic. And the girlfriend said, no, you're fine. And to which I would say, okay, great, let's open another bottle. So I have to say this is a little different doing this presentation like this, because you don't get any audience reactions from anybody like we do when we do this in person. So I hope I'm not putting anyone to sleep. So that was in 2011, and that continued into 2012, 2013. I started having these blackouts, and still I failed to realize what was going on in my life. My girlfriend kept drinking. My oldest daughter was living with me, and it was in 2014 in the spring, one day when she said to me, Dad, you need help. And I said, with what? Because I stupidly did not know what she was referring to. So like I said, I had gone on 3 different blackouts where I'd be drinking, sitting around watching TV with your girlfriend, and then wake up and it was the next day, or maybe I was sitting outside on my patio, didn't know how I got there, or I had a lump on my head. But work I had no problems with, because I was a good employee and I wasn't using a lot of time. So people didn't pick up on any of those signals. And I was having stomach issues legitimately. I now know that a lot of that was related to my drinking, which I didn't know. I remember in October 2013, I wound up being in the hospital for a week. That summer, I had lost a friend from this job to alcoholism. And that October, I just remember being in a ton of pain. And I'd asked the girlfriend if she would take me to the hospital. And she said, I'm sorry, I've been drinking, I can't take you. And I certainly wasn't going to call an ambulance. So I got my daughter up and she drove me to the hospital. And I was in there for 6 days. I was in a lot of pain, had a lot of the typical things, pancreatitis, the elevated enzymes, et cetera, you know. And I remember about 3 or 4 days into this, a doctor came into the room and he said, I'm going to tell you what your problem is. He said, you are allergic to alcohol. You cannot drink anymore. And then he left. And I thought, whew, thank God. For a second there, I really thought that I was an alcoholic. Now I know I just have an allergy and everything will be okay. And once again, I stopped drinking like I did when I had the blackouts. I'd say, boy, I would go through withdrawal at home. Highly not recommended, very dangerous to do. I didn't know that, but I would be sick as a dog for 2 or 3 days, shaking and sweating and not being able to sleep. So here I am in October, I get out of the hospital, I come home, I'm good for about 3 or 4 months, and then the process starts again. And in July of 2014, I thought I was okay to go in for my 4 to 12 shift. I was drunk, didn't think I was drunk, didn't know I was drunk. And I came to work for my 4 to 12 shift, and I showed up, and Mike had been the day shift sergeant, and I was going to relieve him for 4 to 12s as the lieutenant. And I think that I'm going to turn the story over to him at this point. But please remember that at some point, not only did I recover, but I became the deputy chief of the department. So for anybody who tells you that they're looking to get rid of cops who have an alcohol problem, that is totally wrong. We are very valuable, but let me move along to Mike and let him take over.
Thanks, Shaun. And like Shaun said, it's a little different for us. Usually we're in front of a crowd, and Pete especially, and I like to get up and walk around. So bear with me. I hope I don't bore you. But July 7th, 2014, that Shaun often says that was the best day of his life. That day sucked for me. As he said, I was a sergeant working the day shift at the time, and he was my relief. And Shaun and I worked together obviously for a very long time. My entire career, I was always one rank under Shaun. So as we progressed through the ranks, when he was a sergeant, I reported to him. When he became a lieutenant, I became a sergeant. I was assigned to him. So we knew each other very, very well, but we never really like broke bread together. We never really went out like as friends, but we were friends. So I knew a lot about Shaun. I knew a lot of his habits. I knew a lot of the things that he did. He's a great guy, great friend. I would do anything for him. And one thing I will say is we've done social functions together, but I had never, ever seen Shaun drunk the entire time I was here. So this is 2014, I was hired in 94. So all those years, I'd never seen Shaun drunk. July 7th, it's a beautiful day. I'm working the 8 to 4 shift, and where the shift commander's office is right outside of where our roll call room is. So now we're changing shifts, and I know Shaun was always a little bit late. But in our building, it's a new building at the time, we have 110 cameras. So you could see anything moving in, outside his building, whatever. So I'm looking at the cameras. It's a nice sunny day. I'm just thinking about getting home to play with my 3 kids. And I'm watching the camera to see when Shaun comes in. I see Shaun drive down the ramp into our secured parking lot. I'm like, well, it's about time, you know, and I see him park, and he gets out of the car. And I immediately knew something was a little different because Shaun always carries this black bag with him that goes over his shoulder. And he got out of the car and he didn't have the bag. Something clicked in the back of my mind, but I really didn't pay much attention to it. And I watched him kind of meander through the back parking lot. And another habit that Shaun had is his office is right across the hall from where my shift commander office was. And it would drive me crazy is Shaun, instead of coming in and relieving me or whoever he was relieving at the time, so we can get out a couple minutes early, he would always go to his office. He'd putz around, you hear his keys jingling and paper shuffling. A couple minutes later, he'd come in and relieve us. Well, today he came directly into my office, and he was red-faced, and he just kind of plopped himself down in a seat across from my desk, just looked at me and just started to giggle. And right away, I knew something was off. I'm just looking at him. He's just kind of looking around the room like nothing's going on. And then it dawned on me, I could smell him a little bit. I'm like, oh no. I'm like, he's drunk. I'm like, this isn't good. And my first old school cop, you gotta remember, I was 94, pre-cell phone, pre-cameras. We used to have a lot of fun. Things were different back then. My old school mentality was, how am I gonna get Shaun out of this building? I quickly realized there's no way in hell I could get Shaun out of this building because of where we were. It was the hub of the activity. All the day shifters were coming in to go home. All the 4 to 12 shift people were coming in to start their shift. There's no way. First call I made was to our union president. He did not answer the phone. Second call I made was to our union vice president. He did not answer the phone. The union was absolutely useless. I'm sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. I looked at Shaun and we're talking, and I said, Shaun, are you okay? And he just kind of gave me that look, like, why are you even asking me that? You know, I'm a lieutenant, you're a sergeant. He's like, yeah, I'm fine. I said, Shaun, why don't you go in your office for a second? Went across the hall into his office. I shut the door behind him, and it was just the 2 of us in there. And I looked at him again. I said, Shaun, are you okay? And that's when he broke down. He just started to cry, and he's like, no, I'm not okay. I need help. I didn't know where else to go. So I said, all right, Shaun. I said, we got this. And that's when I made the phone calls to the union president, vice president, no response. I'm like, Shaun, okay. You know, we ended up hugging. As we found out that I'm not a very emotional guy, but we found out through this course, and we'll learn from P2 that apparently I'm a hugger. Never knew that. Don't tell my wife. So I left him in his office. I said, Shaun, stay right here. I got to go make some phone calls. So I left him in his office, and in retrospect, the one thing I regretted not doing was to make sure he did not have a weapon on him. I didn't think Shaun was that type of person, and I didn't think about it until we actually started doing these presentations, is if he came to work drunk, because this is a man who loves his job, and he would never do anything to anybody on the job or at the job, but it came into my mind, well, if he came to work drunk, what else is he capable of? Luckily, obviously, he's sitting here, so nothing happened, but I left him in his room, in his office, and I made some phone calls, and I called the deputy chief at the time. The deputy chief is a great man, walks on water. To this day, we're still in contact. I knew he knew how to handle this. I did not want to call the chief. Our chief at the time, he came from an outside agency. He wasn't very favorable towards people with drinking problems because from his previous agency, when they try to get people help, it didn't result in good results. Sorry, that's pretty bad English. We didn't have good results from that. So he kind of had a bias against people with drinking problems. So I called our deputy chief at the time. He didn't answer his phone. To his defense, they were in contract negotiations. So I texted him. I said, Dep, you got to give me a call. So he calls me right away. He goes, Stewie, he goes, I know if you're calling me, there's a problem. He goes, what's going on? I said, Dep, I said, Shaun's here. He just came to work and he's shithoused. I said, we got to do something for him. He said, I'll be right down. So I'm waiting for the deputy chief to come downstairs. I go back into Shaun's office and he's on the telephone. I said, Shaun, who are you talking to? He goes, I'm calling the chief. I need to tell him what I just did. I said, hang up that phone. I said, I got the deputy chief coming down. He's like, oh, that's better. And he hangs up the phone. So the deputy chief comes down. I tell him, here, Shaun's in the office. The three of us meet very briefly. I left the lieutenant with the deputy chief. I'm a sergeant, none of my business. He's in capable hands. I went back out to my office. Now I got to worry about getting the next shift on the road. I'm sure the supervisor. It took me about 45 minutes to settle everything down. You know, my job is over at this point. Now my job is just make sure the rest of the shift is working. To me, it was a call for service, is basically what it becomes. So we get everything settled down. Shaun's kids come down, pick him up. I don't know what arrangements were made. It's above my pay grade. I went home. My wife asked me, why are you so late today? I said, fucking Shaun. You know, I'm like, I told her what happened. I'm like, I can't believe he did this. I'm like, you know, whatever. I'm like, so I was a little worked up. So I went for a run, came back home, had a couple beers, started to feel better. I'm playing with my kids or whatever. But I rolled it over in my mind. Did I do the right thing? Did I do the wrong thing? Of course, cops, we always second guess ourselves. But I never got any feedback. I didn't know what happened to Shaun. So next day I just come to work, my regular day shift. And that's when the shit started. And for those of you in law enforcement, you can imagine what some of the responses were when I got to work. I was called everything from a rat. I was a scumbag. I turned in the lieutenant to actually a couple of people told me, because as those of us in law enforcement and other careers, as you go up in rank, the less friends you have, which is so true. We had some people who said I should have arrested the lieutenant because I saw him on camera driving in. So I had him operating a vehicle and I knew he was drunk, so I should have arrested him. So I got bombarded from every angle. And now I'm really second guessing myself. I'm like, did I do the right thing? And it didn't even dawn on me at the time. It's like, I really didn't do anything. I'm like, Shaun came to me. I just happened to be the guy that was at the office. And I did exactly what he wanted done. He wanted help. He wanted those phone calls made. So the one thing that really, like, I linger on is out of a department of 150 people, only one individual actually came up to me and said, what happened? I told the individual what happened, that he came to work on his own mission. He came, he broke down and he wanted help. And the guy goes, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But that didn't stop the rumors. Everybody else, it doesn't make a good story. You know, everybody else either wanted to fuck the lieutenant or, you know, screw the sergeant, you know, because he's just being a dick. He's just trying to get through the ranks, whatever. Yeah, I heard it all. So I think the biggest problem we had was internal. And I never really dealt with it because nobody kept me in the loop of what happened, nor did I expect them to. Until about 2 weeks later, Shaun came back to work. He ended up doing an intensive outpatient program. 2 weeks later, he comes back to work. Everything's fine. I'm back in his office. He's my boss. And we just had a normal conversation. He just said, thank you. And we really didn't go much more into that. And I left it alone because if he doesn't want to talk about it, I'm not going to ask. So never really thought about it until a year later. On July 7, 2015, my phone rings. It's Shaun. He goes, hey, buddy. I said, hey, LT. He goes, you know what today is? Yeah, it's, you know, July 7th. He goes, yeah, what else? I said, it didn't even know me. He goes, today's 1 year of sobriety. But he corrects me. It's the last day he drank. His first day of sobriety is July 8th. But he called me on that day. And that's when I knew I actually made a difference and it had an impact. And it impacted me pretty profoundly. And then when I met with Dr. Dara, the first time I met Dr. Dara out in Arizona, we're doing a CIT conference on this exact subject. Dara really put it in a better context for me. And I'll let Dr. Dara speak more to that. But the trauma, and I hate to use the word trauma because I didn't know what these guys went through, but the trauma of having to deal with the internal pressures from inside and some of the external pressures was a lot more than I ever expected or anticipated, and really never even thought about until we brought it up in these types of forums. So Shaun got the help that he needed, and we're grateful. And the agency stood by him because they saw the value in Shaun. And as he said, he rose through the ranks of deputy chief. Well, then we got to Pete. Pete was a handful. Pete and I were good friends ever since he came up from New York City. We were drinking buddies. We had kids around the same age. We were both on the SWAT team. You know, I became the SWAT team commander. He was one of my snipers. We did a lot of SWAT competitions together. We did a lot of going to each other's houses. He had a pool. We'd have parties. But as everything, you know, things start to change a little bit. And Pete started drinking, and Pete started missing a lot of work. And when we say a lot of work, we mean a lot of work. Like, he started burning through time. And that's one of the patterns that we noticed with him. But nobody really wanted to call Pete out on that. Everybody would complain about Pete, but nobody would say anything to Pete. I think he still holds the record at Danbury PD for calling out road jobs. I think we're up to 50 that he called out sick from, and people were getting a little pissed. But he would also call out from his day shift, and I happen to be his day shift supervisor. The phone, it wouldn't bother Pete to pick up the phone at 7:15 when we start roll call at 7:45. At 7:15, because I always got in early, even though my lieutenant was never going to relieve me early, and still hold a grudge. And then Pete would be on the phone and be like, "Hey, boss, I'm calling out sick." And the first couple of times, I'm like, "All right, Pete, is everything okay?" Yeah. Oh, it's something wrong with Pops or something. You'd always have an excuse. I'm like, "All right, Pete, get better." We have a pretty liberal sick policy here. So after a few times of that, a couple of times we had to order somebody to stay for the midnight shift because he didn't come in for work. So finally one day I got fed up. He called in again. It was probably closer to 7:30 this time. I'm like, "Pete," I'm like, "Are you kidding me, dude?" I'm like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "I got to order somebody." And he goes, "Yep, not my problem." Hangs up the phone. So I get my shift on the road. I'm like, enough of this. I got in my car. I'm in uniform. I'm working. I drove to his house. I knocked on his door. His car was there. I knocked on the door, and lo and behold, I'm like, any bad cop would do. I mean, he actually opened the door for me. Any cop knows you don't open the door. But Pete opened the door, and he looked like he had one hell of a night, and probably a morning too. So we had a frank conversation. I'm like, "Dude, what's going on?" And we talked about stuff. I'm like, "You need help?" He's like, "No, I'm fine." A lot of denial. I'm like, "Dude, you really need to get help." I said, "I'm here as Mike. I'm not here as the sergeant." I said, "I'm here as Mike. I'm here as your friend." I said, "You need help. There's empty cans and bottles all over the house or whatever else." But he let me in, and we had a long conversation. He's like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to get better. I said, "Okay, good for you, buddy." We hugged. I left.
You said we hugged, right?
We hugged.
Okay.
Yeah, we hugged. So then I left. And his behavior changed a little bit, but for not very long. He ends up going to rehab and had a good time, came back home, and he relapsed. And he's going to go into the specifics, so I'm just giving the generals. He ends up relapsing. And by this point now, I'm a lieutenant. I was in patrol for a while, but then I got put up in internal affairs. I'm sorry, let me backtrack one more time. As a sergeant, I went there as his friend. I told another good friend of ours who's another sergeant. I said, "Hey, dude," I said, "I just went to Pete's house in uniform." I said, I told him I'm there as a friend. He goes, "That's fucked up." This other sergeant told me it was fucked up that I went to go check on our friend and that I did it in uniform, and it's a bad image, and his time is his time. It's none of my business. And he was another very, very good friend of mine. And that really struck a chord. I'm like, that's kind of the wrong answer, man. So that kind of left me a little sour. But I'm like, yeah, it's his time. It's obviously his life. And I cared more about his life than I cared about his time. So we move on. Pete goes to rehab, comes home, relapses. He's having his other issues. I got a call from the deputy chief now, Shaun. He goes, "Mike, we got an issue with Pete. It's 6:00 at night. I'm at my kid's hockey practice." He's like, "You got to go check on Pete." I said, "Okay." He goes, "And this time it's official." I said, "Fair enough." So I got somebody to bring my kid home. I went over to Pete's house. I said, "Knock on the door." He opened the door again. And you just stand there kind of like, "What?" And I'm like, "Pete," I said, "Dude, it's official." I said, "I'm here on official business. Can I come in?" And he let me in. And again, he was having a good time. There's bottles, seltzers that he's drinking, and a 7-Eleven big cup. I looked in it, and there's booze in it. And again, we had a long conversation. I was worried about him. He wasn't drunk where he's falling down or anything like that. But he'd been drinking. So we got on the phone with his therapist. Therapist says, after one conversation, he goes, he's fine to stay home by himself. Me and my team will be there in the morning. We'll take care of this. She assured me that he was fine. I said, okay. And I hugged it out again. I said, dude, be good for the night. You know, love you. You got to get help, blah, blah, blah. I'm out the door. And then next thing I know, he goes to rehab. There's a lot of other points that I want to touch on later. I'm going to let Pete tell his story. But there's things that happen inside. And I think the point I want to get to is CIT. We do this at CIT conferences. And we always talk about how great officers have become at CIT with our communities. And everybody drives at home. We're all going to CIT training for a community, for this population and that population. Pete and I were discussing before this Zoom right here. We suck at CIT for ourselves. And that's where we start to really need to change our narrative, because we got a couple examples we want to bring up in a little while. People here within our own agency where I don't know if we failed them, because the result may have been the same, but we didn't get them the help they needed because the people, the officers, their friends who thought they were doing the right thing, never got us involved, and they tried to do it themselves. And we lost a couple officers. So kind of note, I just want to make sure that we go back to how CIT within our own ranks is so important. Now we have to take care of ourselves just like we take care of the public. So I'll turn it over to Pete.
Gary, do you want to jump in for a minute? Maybe throw a few curse words out or something to make yourself.
I don't curse, Shaun.
Oh,
I'm reformed. I'm glad Mike was, though. That's good. Now, I want to apologize to people for the background thing that's over your faces and stuff. I don't know how to turn it off. I've been trying to work in the background to do it myself, but I have failed. But no, hearing, of course, and every time I hear this story that we present on, it's always touching in a way to the public, obviously, because they're responding to it. But to me too, because I knew Shaun I've known Shaun since 2013, so that's 11 years now. And when he had this stuff going on, I actually didn't know that this was happening to him, or he was going through this hard time and still struggling with alcohol. And Mike said that he had seen Shaun socially and never knew that he was a drunk person, like he never saw him drunk. Which reminds me of a bad joke that, a woman was married to an alcoholic, but she never realized he was an alcoholic until one day he showed up sober, right? And I think that's probably, in a lot of cases, we hide it really well, and so you hide this stuff, and it takes a lot of effort and time to try to hide this stuff. Even, and I know where Pete is going to go with this too, and so I want to say this in advance of Pete going, which is sometimes we just are crying for help, but we don't know how to stop ourselves. And so we do these careless things like showing up to work drunk, like opening the door, like people tell you, like these are things that subconsciously we know that we need to stop, but we just don't know how to. And I feel like out of, we have 200 and something people on this call right now. And over the 2 days, we're going to have a whole bunch of different people coming in and out. I am certain that there's a large group on this attendee list today that are going through exact same issues that we are talking about today. And John Kelly, who's going to present later on, he had said something to me, because I think so a lot of times we think in terms of extremes, which is how do we save a life, like how could we save a life. And he said sometimes it's just about offering a new perspective for somebody to think about, to consider, that's good enough. And I feel like, so far we've done that, and so I'll let Pete chat a little bit, and then we'll talk about trauma and what trauma looks like at home, and how we bring that across to the workplace. But Pete, you're up, buddy.
All right, thank you. Like the boss said, it's a little different just us talking to a computer rather than seeing the faces and the expressions. I'll try to keep the cursing to a minimum, but Darren, I might beat you out on that. But I grew up in I'll go quickly through my childhood. Grew up, my parents were straight off the boat from Germany, this, that, and other thing. And grew up in Queens, in New York, and was around alcohol a lot, the whole, my whole childhood with the family and stuff like that. Saw domestic violence and everything else. Around my friends, they were drinking. In high school, we started drinking before soccer games. Went into college, which was great. You have, what do they call it? The college experience. I think I remember mine. But there was a lot of drinking after games and stuff like that. And to go back from college into elementary school, when we talk about trauma and we talk about incidences that occurred in your life, me being, I went to a Catholic school, got sexually assaulted in my school, which I carried for all the way up until I went to the second time in rehab did I talk about it. That was the first time I ever talked about it. The drinking continued through college, continued after college when I was a professional soccer trainer out in Long Island, New York. And then once getting into NYPD, obviously in the academy, you're training, you look great, you're a newbie, you want to save the world and stuff. And I got put into the 73rd precinct, which is a very busy house, and learned quickly how to be a police officer back 22 years ago. Police work has changed for me throughout the years, but that's not the topic, just to let you know that. There was the one thing that came from the 73rd precinct with dealing with the veterans and stuff like that. Whenever there was a problem, you never went to the administration. You never went to the XO, the CO, you never went to the sergeant, lieutenant. It was all kept inside. Or you just never said anything, which my parents taught me that you don't talk about anything that is bad, you talk about everything that is good. I was very, I guess you could say, sheltered or controlled. I was taught never to show my feelings. But in being a police officer, when it says, hey, whatever happens on the job stays on the job, and then you would go off with your partners or whatever, and afterwards and meet at a bar, and then you would have your counseling session, or choir practice, or just go out and have a few drinks and shoot the shit. You never asked for help. That was one of the things that was embedded in my brain for the 4 years I did in NYPD, because they always said that either internal affairs or EAP would take your gun and badge. Well, I started drinking on the job down there with my partner because we were in plain clothes, so we got away with it. Now you really can't, you shouldn't do it. We just became reckless. But he's a great cop now. He's a sergeant, and I'm up here with 22 years of experience. And then I decided to move to Connecticut, where I became a police officer with Danbury, and have great beginning of my career. Became a good officer. Was spoke highly about in the beginning of my year. Another thing I took back from my teachers or my field training officers in New York was shut up, do as you're told, and you'll be fine, which I brought up here, and I did that. But then I started falling into the negativity. I started falling into the people who started talking bad about the administration, who started talking about they're out to get you. That was a big one. Or they're only out for themselves, they're only looking out for themselves, they're not looking out for your best well-being. And you would go work 4 to 12s, and you do your after work drinking and stuff like that. And then when I did midnights, we did that after midnights. We did it at 8 o'clock in the morning. I thought it was like part of it. That's what we did, The one thing that happened to me was I started to learn to come up with excuses. Why should I be drinking? What's the reason now? It's somebody's birthday. Okay, let's drink. Somebody's having a barbecue. Okay, if I'm coming to your house, if you invite me to your house and you're having a barbecue, I can tell you this, I probably have 6 to 8 in me before I even get there, plus the 2 that I have going there. And that's how it all began. And there's so much involved in being an alcoholic, and I'm not afraid to say that. I'm sober 4 years, 7 months, and I don't miss that feeling. I've changed my lifestyle around, and I have a lot of people to thank about that. I've gone, yes, the deputy chief talks about me calling out sick. I look at it now, I'm like, he talks about the record is 50 plus times calling out on an overtime shift. Who the fuck does that? You're asking to take easy money and then all of a sudden you're giving it back. It's like, who does that? I just, I did it because I was so entrapped with whatever demons I was fighting inside. I looked for every excuse possible to drink. And once I grabbed onto one excuse or a demon, the next one came out and the next trauma came out and whatever else I had from PTSD, from 9/11 or anything else like that, it all came out. It's like, okay, you're feeling this way, let's hook on to this. Remember you were sexually assaulted. You're feeling this way, okay, it's closer to September 11th, go start drinking, let's mask it, let's get rid of the feelings. I wanted to be numb. I wanted that feeling. That feeling of numbness was, for me, great at the time, but then the next day I felt like crap. I was like, why? I would look in the mirror I remember I tell these stories a lot to people. I say I would drink and be drunk and walk to the bathroom and be like, and look in the mirror and go, why am I doing this to myself? Looking for someone to give me an answer. And nothing came back. And I sit there and I think about the more times I say that is because the answer had to come from me. I needed to say why I wanted to stop drinking. The calling out sick, to me, that was me telling everybody, hey, I have a problem, keep an eye out on me. When I would come to work after drinking for a couple of days and going on a binge, and when I tell you I went on a binge, the binge would be, okay, I'm home, I go to the liquor store at 9 o'clock and say hello to the person, say hi, talk bullshit, grab a couple bottles of wine, go home, start drinking, just hang out, just stay in the house, isolation. I was recently divorced when this all started, so that was another thing that I grabbed onto. Well, I'm divorced, I'm home, I can do whatever I want, nobody's there to tell me what to do, so I'll just feel sad and then I'll start drinking, I'll feel better. So I would watch TV, I'd drink myself and I would pass out, I'd wake up, I'd go to the liquor store again, I'd come back, all on the same day, but not go to the same liquor store because I would play what they call liquor store roulette, and I would go to the next one. And then I would go, if I ran out and I had to press for time, I would go, since we're on the New York line, things are open later on the New York line, I head over to New York and get more. And then come home and drink again and pass out. But the more I think about it, and I chuckle about it because it's just like obscene, and why did I do this? If I woke up in the middle of in the morning, early at 3 o'clock, and there was a half a glass of warm wine there, I would pick up and I would drink it. That's how bad it got. And then it got to the point where I would drink fireball shots, in the car, doing this, doing that. It was my thought process was not 100%, and now I'm going to work hungover, and I'm not 100%. So if I'm not 100% for the public or the community that I'm there to serve and protect, who else I'm not protecting? Who else I'm not 100% for? The staff, my peers, my partner, like everybody on the road. I'm pretty much in danger. It was at the point where I would just continue to say that, and then I got hooked onto the negativity. So when I talk about negativity, I talk about the people that are negative in the department, where again, they have a problem with the administration, or they have a problem with someone looking into you, asking you questions about your life. Are you okay? Is everything all right? How you doing? How you feeling? This, that. I got so caught up into it that, to me, that was a trigger for me to drink that day and to be nasty to that person the rest of the day. It was so bad that, you know, during the day shift when I worked, at around 12 o'clock, I would be like, what liquor store am I going to on the way home? Because this is bullshit. Everybody's asking me if I'm okay. They should just mind their own damn business. And then people are like, hey, are you taking off again because you haven't paddled? Or are you taking off again because you took off last weekend? And I'm like, why are they asking? It's my time. I can do whatever I want. That was the negativity. And then they would tell me, hey, you took off so much that the administration's looking at you now. Now internal affairs is looking at you now, and they're coming to get you. They're gonna, and they, I mean the rumors, the lighter fluid, the whatever it was that built up. Just, I was like, oh my God, that's how I lost my friendship with the deputy chief. We're friends now. You know, I keep him in the loop. I work with him. I trust him, and we talk about this a lot in our speeches. We talk before, during, after. You know, we make fun of him because he's a hugger now, but he does have feelings. But, you know, I kind of shut him out, and it was all because I was masking everything with alcohol. And I was listening to everybody, the naysayers, the people who's the negativity. You know, you have to get away from them. You have to get away from people who are the negative part of the department, because what teaches that is that we're gonna enable the person who really needs help, right? You're gonna keep it away. You're gonna keep it away from the people that can really help them, right? You're gonna keep them bottled down, saying, listen, we got you, don't say anything to anybody. You're gonna get fired, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. Well, you know what? And the deputy chief is right, you know, we've done that as a department, and we've lost great guys, you know? But, you know, I say this to a lot of people in administration and speeches. When it comes to the administration, if somebody comes up to you and someone says, hey, you know, this person, look into it, this person needs help, let's do it together. Or someone comes up to you and says, I'm watching you may need some help. Don't look to be punitive, give them that helping hand, show them that you care, because the department that you have, the people, the personnel, your peers, your officers or whatever, they're valuable to you. They're very valuable to you. And this is what these guys saw in me. You know, Shaun here was with the chief, who just came in when I went, when I was going away the second time. The first time I went away, it didn't work, it didn't click. You know, it didn't have what I needed. It was basically there, and I was the only first responder there. You know, I needed a place with structure. I needed a place with, you know, a format or a drive. And when I went away to the place in Pennsylvania, you know, it had that structure. It had first responders, and we talked about our stories, and they were just the same story, but a different department. It was like, okay, I'm telling you this story. The guy from the fire department says, yeah, I did the same thing. Or the guy from corrections says, oh yeah, I did that, but I did this. Or somebody from EMS, or, you know, something like that. It was the same story. And we were there to help each other. And that's what we learned there. You know, the other thing that I learned there that is, it was me that needed to really figure out what I needed. And that was, again, that was the structure. It had to come from me. It can't come from anybody else. Everybody else can say, yes, you drink too much, you drink. I know I drink too much, but why? Why do I drink too much? What is the why? What is my why I drink so much? I never talked about the sexual assault. I never talked about me not happen to have feelings, or not being able to talk about good, bad, and different. Now, to be honest, I'm fucking transparent now. I'll tell you everything. And whether you like me or not, Oh, you wanna be part of my circle? Okay, but I get people who more respect me because I'm transparent. My friends, my circle of friends has gotten smaller. I'm still friends with the other people, but my circle of friends is tighter because I can trust them, right? I can call them at any time during the day, night, morning. I'm in trouble, and it's a proven fact. I do the speeches with the guys here, and we learn more and more. And the speech changes every time we talk. This is not one of my normal speeches. And Dr. Dara can tell you that because he's heard it numerous times. Again, I'm gonna jump on what the deputy chief said. We as a department or as first responders suck at taking care of our own. And this is here, and I'm the CIT coordinator for the department, right? So we're great at taking care of the community because we can tell them what to do, right? You need to do this, you need to do that, you need to go to the hospital. Are you having a bad day? Okay, this is what I can offer, resources, this, that, and another thing. But when it comes to us, when the deputy chief, when Mike said to me, you have a drinking problem. Or when I went to Shaun's office and he says, do you think you drink too much? Fuck no, no. You know, it's denial, you know, but it's the fear, again, of being punished, I think. And and we have to get away from that. So lay the groundwork down with a peer support team. Do that peer support team, have resources for them, keep things confidential. Obviously, if it gets to a point where it can't be, you gotta go administration, you gotta do all that, and you gotta get them to help administration, through the administration. But help them, be there for them. You know, we talked about our lives and how we handle it here. And my success story, I'm a victor, right? I had great help. I thank these guys all the time. In every speech, they saved my life. Again, with Shaun going into his office, he vouched for me. He vouched for me. He saw the good part of my career. And when the new chief came in, he's like, what's the problem with Pete? You talk so highly of him and that he was such a great cop. And now he's fallen. What do we do? And he says, we gotta help him. Gotta save him. And you know, Deputy Chief Sturman here, Mike, he wants, you know, he wanted to help me. He saw me grow with him in the department, on the SWAT team, with his family, great time together, and then all of a sudden I fell into that negativity and it fell apart. You know, there's so much more that comes with helping somebody, and I think the biggest part is if someone comes to you and you ask them, are you okay? How's things? And they pause a little bit, something's not right. You gotta listen. That's the big part. You gotta be that ear to listen. And then ask them, do they have any suggestions? What are they gonna come up with? You know, the day I knew the first time I went to rehab was I was drinking on my ex's deck. And I drank one bottle of wine and I drank the second bottle of wine. And my son, he was older, he was upstairs playing video games. And I didn't feel nothing from the booze, but he came over, grabbed a bottle of wine. I saw his hand. I said, what are you doing? He pours it out. He goes, make the call. You know, I tell that story because he saw it. You know, at 14 years old, this kid saw that I had a problem. So I went away. That's the first part when I went away. Second part, you know, I went to Pennsylvania and, you know, we took it seriously. We took it seriously where we came back and, you know, the AA meetings, you know, I started my own journey, you know, still sober to this day. I feel great. I started, you know, a new regimen, you know, working out, eating right, you know, all this stuff. And, you know, I think, you know, being the second or third senior guy on the day shift, you know, being 53 years old and sober, I watch out for the younger guys. I tell them, if you got a problem, come see me. I'm also part of peer support. You know, all the stuff that Shaun developed before he retired, you know, we're continuing through, we're learning, we're progressing, we're learning new things to keep it stronger to help out our department. You know, and you gotta build that. You know, the thing is, it starts with the person who has the issue, right? And we were talking about this earlier. But before I hit that, Mike told his story, right? And it's a great story, and it gets a little touchy-feely. I like seeing him get emotional, but it keeps him human. But the one, you ask yourself, he tells the story, he helped out Shaun, he came to my house, he's dealing with this. There's so many bits, there's two pieces of puzzle that are like, I don't know if it's PTSD or trauma for us, but two deaths that we had to deal with within that. And nobody, you know what? Nobody asked him if he was okay. Nobody asked him if he was okay. He was dealing as a boss with everything, worrying about us two, right? Worried about him, got him up, got him better. Then he came worried about me, but nobody asked him how he was doing. So that's another thing. But like I talk about, you know, the other two things that we have with trauma, we had a sergeant who was fighting cancer, and you know, he had passed away from cancer, and we were preparing for his funeral. And on that funeral day, the person that was fighting alcohol and demons and whatever else he was dealing with mental health, we as friends, and probably I'm included in it, we enabled it. We covered it up, and we covered it up too much. We shouldn't have covered it up. I could talk about it because he's a friend of mine, and he's probably watching me now, is that he went away twice, but he also left on his own accord twice. He wasn't ready. I don't know why. I don't know why. I tried to help him. I remember coming into work and he getting a phone call. I was at a robbery scene, getting a phone call from the shift commander saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm at a robbery scene. What's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, I need you to leave. Andrew is in a hotel room with his service weapon." And I was like, "Okay, I'm on my way." Leave there. I started heading over there, meet the sergeant. We walk down the hallway. We go to his room. I don't hear anything. We go around the backside, open window. I see him laying on his bed with his firearm in his hand. Went in. It was the first one there. Just broke down, cried, and walked. You know, just looked at him and said, "I failed you." And you know, I didn't know what to say. You know, it's still tough. You know, but I know he's proud of me for what I'm doing. He always talked to me and everything else like that. But it was hard because now, you know, we call the deputy chief. He's got to come. He's worried about me. We got the funeral today for the other sergeant, and now he's, you know, we got the funeral. He's worried about the funeral. It was a whole big. It was a day to remember. Yes, day to learn from. 100%. But we were dealing with so much. Not only did we have to go to the funeral, after the funeral, I put on my hat for peer support, and with the deputy's permission, I started doing peer support stuff. And why did I do that? It kept my mind off everything and everything. But I would ask him, "Hey, this person needs to go home." 4 to 12 shift, which was the Andrew shift. I would ask him, "Hey, these guys need to go home. Do you give them permission? They can't be here. They're not patrol ready today. I'll stay," whatever, or some other guy, midnight guys were coming in early, other departments were coming in, and he gave the permission. But I was so in and doing things, and that was my way of dealing with it.
If I could just jump in.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, getting back to our friend Andrew, I was the captain at the time, patrol. Shaun was the deputy chief. So the trio of us here have gone through quite a lot over the last few years together. Pete got the call, he was working. I was bringing my kid to a hockey game, I had to dump him off, and I think I was probably second or third on the scene after the patrol guys. And then the deputy showed up, and there was our friend Andrew had taking his own life, laying in bed, bottle of vodka on the side. What Pete was talking about after the fact is I was a patrol captain. We had to deal with everything. So obviously it was very chaotic. We had the wake for the sergeant, we had the death of Andrew. The emotions were just running high. It's in December, so we're holiday season too. So I mean, that just compounded on all the problems. So we did our best to, my first order was to call in surrounding towns, and they sent officers over to man our shifts so we could send our people home. We called in peer support from Hartford and all their surrounding towns. They came down. The hardest part was dealing with the personalities. We have some officers that are kind of stubborn, like Pete and I. We were raised, if you have any feelings, stuff them down. If they start to come up, just stuff them down harder, you'll be fine. We had a bunch of those officers like, I'm not leaving, it's not gonna do me any good. So we had to tailor the program. We can't force anybody to go home. That might have been the worst thing for them. So we learned a lot from those experiences. But my biggest experiences from being the patrol captain during this whole time was the comments I received from some of the officers who were his friends, and I don't doubt their intentions one bit. But I think the way they went about it was wrong. I mean, a couple comments that I heard, one comment I heard from one of them was, well, I guess I need to backtrack a little bit. 3 years prior to this, I was the patrol lieutenant, I believe, at the time. And I have a black cloud over my head. Bad shit happens when I'm in the office. And I get a phone call. Andrew's being transported up to the hospital. He tried killing himself. He lived in a neighboring town. I go up to the hospital. His wife is basically, she's basically 10 and a half weeks pregnant. I mean, she was like beyond pregnant. She was ready to give birth to her child. I'm sorry, I was gonna say 10 and a half months. She was beyond pregnant. She was 2 weeks away, I think, from giving birth to their daughter. We meet him at the hospital. Andrew had Googled, how do you kill yourself? So we're there, we're comforting her. We're trying to do everything. We get him down to Alabama, I think he went. Did not stay, maybe a week, maybe two, if that. Comes back. But after that, he goes, I'm fine, I'm fine. His friends were checking on him. For about 3 years, apparently Ed was fine, but he started to miss things again. And then Andrew kills himself. That's when you start hearing stories about your peers. Nobody wants to tell the administration, nobody wants to tell the boss, nobody wants to reach out for help for our own friends because of the stigma, like Pete said, and oh, he's gonna lose his gun, he's gonna lose his badge, he's gonna lose that. There's nothing more important in your life. Maybe they will lose their job, but they're gonna be alive. So a couple of the comments I heard from some of my officers was, well, that was a waste of 3 years of my life. It took me back. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm like, this guy's your friend and you just looked at it as a waste. I'm like, at least he had 3 years with his daughter. You know, but, and I'm not saying that we're superheroes up here or anything like that, and we know everything. You know, if we got involved, could we maybe got him help? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it would have been the same result. Would he still be dead today? I don't know, maybe. But they didn't try to use a mechanism. So I think we have proven it, at least in this agency, where we love our officers, we believe in our officers, and we want them to thrive. And sometimes that means, yes, they can't thrive within the organization because of all the problems, but we can at least keep them alive and get them the help that they need. So that was one of the comments that really struck me, was that was a waste of 3 years of my life. And then after he dies, that's when we find out from all of his other friends, oh, well, yeah, he was drinking all the time. He'd be at the liquor store at 8 o'clock, or we'd cover for him. Sometimes he came to work and he was buzzed, but they wouldn't tell us. They would just cover for him. They'd handle his calls. So I think that's when I said earlier that we suck at CIT for ourselves. We really need to get the message out to our own officers that it's okay to reach out for this help, and that I can only speak for this agency, and many of them around us I know are very, very good agencies here in Connecticut and on border towns and everywhere else, and I'd like to think throughout the world. We believe in our employees, and you have to give them that opportunity, but we have to bridge that gap where they think the administration's out to get them, because we are not. We are out to help them. Pete has one. He came to me, I think it was after his second stint. I was in internal affairs, and he comes walking. He didn't enter my office. He stood in the doorway. He had that angry German look that he gets every once in a while because he just came out of Chief's office.
Every once in a while?
Most of the time. So he comes to my office and he fills up my door. Hey, boss, he goes, I gotta ask you something. What, Pete? Because at this point, Pete and I weren't talking. We were good friends, and it got to the point where we didn't even speak. We lost our friendship. And it was like, you know, we'd be in a hallway, yeah, fuck you, Pete, but fuck you, Mike. You know, we just were like, whatever. So he came into the office, he's like, I gotta ask you. He goes, I hear you, there's a target on my back. You guys are coming after me. I just kind of looked at him. The first question, Pete, you can answer the first question I asked him. He said, oh yeah, Pete. I said, who's telling you that? And the light bulb went off. He goes, because I knew who was telling him that. And it was one of our biggest malcontents down here, who's in everybody's business but their own, and just always trying to stir things up because this officer didn't like the deputy chief at the time. So just stirring things up. I said, Pete, think about it. I said, nobody's out to get you. We're not looking at you. I said, but I will tell you this, because I had to give him a caveat. He's been to twice. I said, I will tell you this. We're not going to help you again. So I think that kind of woke him up. He walked away with an appreciation. He goes, fair enough. So you got to watch out for your own malcontents within your own agency. And you got to spread the word. Pete could talk better to it as a peer coordinator. But I just implore all of you, please, trust in your administration, or at least start building that bridge with your administration.
I want to add too, you know, Mike, you know, given that we've always spoken about this, how are you doing now?
How am I doing?
Yeah.
No, I'm doing okay. No, I'm doing good. And actually, to be honest with you, it's things like this that actually help me more than anything. Just to get the story out and just to talk about it, because I was born that German-Irish kid where you just don't talk about things. And so getting it out is very, very helpful. We all have our own trials and tribulations in life that I go through, but I talk more than I used to. There, as you know, we had a nice stroll along the river down in West Virginia. It was very nice. No, life is going good.
Good. You know, when we talk about this topic, I can't help but think about the similarities between addiction to suicide. You know, when you think about career suicide, you think about, well, how people kill themselves, you know, the guilt, the shame, the hiding, the, you know, manipulation, like all of the things that you do to successfully kill yourself, you know, and how could we identify that in the career suicide versus taking your life suicide? You know, both Shaun and Pete didn't get into details today about it, but we have spoken in details before. But both come from a background of being abused in a variety of ways, you know. And so coming in with a victim, you know, because as kids, they were victims, you know, they were victimized. And so there is a transition point where people start, as an adult, I think that every victim has to actually reach a point like this at some point where they decide, I don't want to be a victim anymore. I want to be a victor, like Pete said, right? And I want to be able to be the writer of my own story, as opposed to just things happening to me. I want to happen to things. And I feel like that's a really important and powerful step for people to own their victimhood and then transition that across to being able to do something proactively. You know, I think about the last time I was asking my wife, when was my sister-in-law's wedding? That was the last time that I ever got drunk. You know, that was August 1st, 2006. And I have been happier than anything else to never feel that way again. Like, it was, you know, a fun time in Mexico at the time, but awful results afterwards, right? And, you know, and then it sent me back to thinking about this. And we haven't talked about this before. When my wife and I were trying to have a child, we were transitioning cars from a Camry to a Camry, and then we were thinking, you know, we really wanted to get a Highlander. You know, that was like a real lofty goal that we had in our life, you know. And we started to say, hey, do we buy the car that we plan for now, or do we want to buy the car that we plan for the future? And we ended up getting the Highlander at that point, and things fell into place. We ended up having a child, you know. And you think about, how do I take steps to plan for the future as opposed to just planning day to day to day to day? And we've seen this in all circumstances in the community when we work with people in crisis, right? People in crisis are just thinking now for now for now. They're just getting through, they're white knuckling it to get through how they could get through today, as opposed to thinking and separating out a little bit about what's it going to look like in a month, in 6 months, in a year, in 5 years? What do I want for my future? And how do I build towards that future goal, as opposed to just grinding through the day? And I know that both, you know, Shaun, Pete, yourself, and I know that Mike, even you, even though that was not part, you know, that wasn't your story, you have a different version of the story. You know, you guys probably were all in that same crisis spot. So before you comment, I want to get here to a couple of questions that we have, and then we could chat some more. But So this gentleman, who I believe you guys might know, Brent Graham, he said, should the canteen at any station for officers carry alcoholic beverages? Now, I don't know how it's like in Connecticut, if that is a thing, or if any canteen carries alcoholic beverages, but what's that?
It's a canteen.
Yeah, I suppose it's a cafeteria or some sort of rec area that you would have.
They room carried alcohol.
Oh, absolutely not.
No,
Yeah,
Or,
yeah,
I know at police funerals, you get what they call the canteen trucks from the different unions and stuff, department. And right, at every funeral I've ever gone to, yes, they definitely have alcohol on board.
yeah, yeah. Well, and for you guys that have been to Police Week as well, I know that Police Week is essentially a drunk fest, right? You go hopping from bar to bar to bar. It's like a bar hopping experience. But I mean, because you use alcohol in grief, you use alcohol in celebration, you use alcohol in so many different ways. When you're sober, you have to figure out all of these other ways to celebrate without being drunk. And so he said, yeah, cafeteria.
No, absolutely not. Alcohol is not allowed on the premise of the city property.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's something in policy and something in practice, right? Right, Mike?
Derek, before you go on to your next question,
Yes.
a big point for me today, when you said that it's in your subconscious, because not consciously decide the day I came into work, I didn't say, I'm drunk, I think I'm gonna go to work and report myself in, that was my subconscious was driving me that day, because like Mike said, I came in without my work bag. And never ever did I do that. I came in without my gun, right? I don't remember doing any of that, and it wasn't until I got here and Mike said, Shaun, what's going on with you? And I said, I broke down and said, I need help. That was all from my subconscious. When you mentioned that today, I'm like, damn, that's right. He sees that. So thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome. You're welcome, man. Lauren asked a question. She says, was there an investigation for the incident, whether going into the house in uniform or seeing him with a DUI, was there ever an investigation that happened regarding Shaun or Pete? She said, that's something that I see happen and is far from the mark of what needs to happen. As someone is asking for help and someone tries to get help, but no good deed goes unpunished trying to get help. What was that thought process, Mike? How did you manage to stay the course?
Dealing with both of them, no, there was never an official report done on either one of them. Someone came for help, he got the help, that was it. As far as we're concerned, it didn't affect anything within this agency or the public that anybody needed to know about. He's just an individual in crisis. With Pete, there were some notes taken, but nothing official. Just, hey, on this day, I went to visit him. That's still in a folder somewhere. I kind of keep it as a reminder that, we got him the help. It's buried in a folder. It's not on department letterhead. It's just a handwritten note, and that's where it's going to stay.
there was one other piece of paper that when I came back from rehab, it was everybody, and then here comes the, what do you call them, people? Malcontents, or the negative people. Oh, don't sign that piece of paper. It's what's the last something?
Yeah,
last chance agreement. No, this was something that I again, they heard that I needed structure, I needed something, I needed a goal, and it was basically almost like a paragraph, an outline, what I needed to do for the next, I think it was 6 months. Like I needed to go every week, I needed to go see my therapist. Every week I needed to see a drug alcohol counselor. And I needed to do that in order to not keep my job, but to stay focused. And I did that. And I did that for 6 months. And that's another tool that brought me to where I was. I signed that thing immediately. I had no second guesses. I just shut off everybody that was negative.
Yeah,
I would never drink while I was employed as a Danbury police officer, and the union said, don't sign that. And I said, no, that's probably gonna save my life, because I know if I sign this piece of paper and I drink, I don't have to be drunk. It just says, if you drink, you will face termination. And that other than this guy saving my life by doing the right thing, and to this day, I'm 10 years sober, and I definitely say he saved my life by doing the right thing and not sticking me in a car and driving me home, because I would have drank myself to death. So,
Yeah. Yeah, the last chance agreements are interesting, right? It could be a benefit as well as a hardship for people. And when you know that you need that external corralling, it's important to accept it. Some people don't have the internal strength to do it themselves. They just don't, because when you are recovering, it's hard to have strength in general to be everything for everybody, and much less be anybody for yourself. Is very difficult.
I did think with Pete, because I was deputy chief with him, and was it 2 rehabs he'd gone through, I think, right? And we had an episode where you were in your car, passed out in a gas station, and at that point I thought maybe discipline is the only thing I'm going to be able to do to save this guy's life, because sending him to rehab twice hadn't worked. People talking to me, I mean, we weren't even friends anymore, and here I kept saying, Pete, I'm an alcoholic. I went through what you're going through. I'm trying to help you. But the malcontent said, no, the deputy chief's just trying to screw you over and make you lose your job. But I will admit that third time I thought I may need to use discipline as a way to save his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hey, for whatever it takes, it worked. All of the ingredients worked well. We have a few more. Well, this is a comment. I wanted to add that the crisis is always relationship based in the end. And when departments support and stand by their people, the outcomes always turn out differently. And I think that that's true. Leo said, excellent panel. How would you help someone make a sober analysis of themselves?
So, so how do I see myself now?
You're talking about somebody that needs to get sober?
Yeah, somebody that needs to get sober. How could they do a sober analysis? And Leo presented for us last year, and he is in recovery too. And as he spoke about, that's a really interesting question.
I think the first thing, so a lot of people drink because they're not happy, right? So if you're going to do a sober analysis of yourself, and if I was drinking again, I would look to see, do I like feeling this way? Am I making good decisions? Am I making poor decisions? Am I making the right decision? What I go through in life, if I wasn't sober, if I was still drinking, that affects my family, that affects everything, workers, peers, bosses, whatever. What I go through financially, marriage, family, this, that, anything that I go through, everybody else that's close to me goes through. So you have to I take everything in perspective where, listen, it's gonna affect me, but it's gonna affect everybody else, right? I wake up every morning, I put my 2 feet on the ground, and I'm happy, I'm above ground, I have a job, I have 2 beautiful kids, I have an ex-wife who we're still family, we have a great relationship, I'm happy. I don't wanna be miserable, I don't wanna be the malcontent, I said it right this time. I don't wanna be the malcontent, I don't wanna be that negative person. I have goals in my life now, I had goals, but they were stopped or blockade or whatever, they just stopped by alcohol, because I'd rather drink than go through my goals. I wanna have another 10 years here, and then I wanna live life, I wanna enjoy myself, If I kept drinking, I wouldn't be here today.
I guess I think a sober analysis is what Pete said earlier, is when it's noontime and you're sober and you're driving around at work at lunchtime and you're thinking of which liquor store you're going to. I think that's when you really gotta think, do I have a problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people go into therapy and try to sabotage this therapy relationship by trying to outsmart the therapist and show the therapist that they're stupid, etc., because it's a game, right? And then if you could do that, you could say, well, therapy didn't work, And so here I am, I tried it, it didn't work. But, taking a true account of why you're doing something and what you're trying to get out of it, I think is important. we have a few more comments and questions here, guys. I like what Juan said. Juan works with us at BluePaz, and he said instead of asking why the addiction, ask why the pain, which is a quote from Dr. Gabor Mate. He said, I think that a lot of people are living in pain, which is why they try to escape the reality of living, right? This comment from one of our colleagues here in Suriname said we sometimes protect each other, but in the wrong way. Sometimes covering up an incident is not an answer because we enable each other essentially, and we start seeing the person as a friend and not as a law enforcer that has a responsibility to the public to serve and protect them with sound mind, essentially being able to take care of them. And it's very difficult to persuade someone who's a colleague to not kill themselves if, you know, they really want to do that. And I'm sure that you guys could relate and reflect on that one. Has consideration, go ahead, Shaun.
I was going to say, I do think, I know we kind of kicked CAT in the butt today, but and Mike especially said CAT for ourselves. I do think peer support is doing way better than it has in the past. I see so much more about officer wellness and looking at the other things, whether it's financial problems or home problems. Again, I love this job. You know, I've been doing this 40 years and I love it. I'm so glad that I got into a profession and I love so much. And it wasn't a job where my problem was. My problem was off the job. You know, you've talked about my, PTSD. I had 57 years of it before I got sober, and now I just completely lost my train of thought. What I was
No,
say.
but it's true though, right? You brought home to work.
I did.
I think that's important. We have a couple.
That's what I was trying to say. Is peer support's come a long way.
Yes,
I think
yes,
it's
it
doing a
has.
big job. I think it is helping people, and this is what we're doing here today. This is peer support.
Yes.
Trying to encourage people to step forward. If you see somebody with a problem, confront them. Like I said, I realized I was losing a friendship with Pete. I'm glad I've gotten it back. But I'm a hostage negotiator. I'm a CIT officer. I couldn't figure out how to talk to him into getting the help that he needed. So, but
Yeah.
it's definitely come a long way, baby.
I wanna ask a question from one of the brightest people that I've met in the past year. It's Mark, and I mean that wholeheartedly. So, what is the best way to balance discipline or the absence of discipline with deterrence from people taking advantage of similar situations as a get out of jail free card when they get caught? I know that we need to demonstrate support, but where do we draw the line to demonstrate the gravity of the situation?
That's got to be individual, right? Like you can't, there's just no blanket statement, but I think this department's good in that it's in our contract that if you have a problem with alcohol, that you will be offered the opportunity to go for help. So strike one is not, let's write this guy out. Strike one is, let's offer them the help. You have to take it, but the offer is out there. So, but there's different, God forbid I driven in drunk and struck somebody. You can't say, look, we're going to give them a pass.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I agree. Everything is dependent on that exact situation. So I guess there's really no clear answer, but what I find is the officers themselves will drive the level of discipline. Are they open to what you're trying to do for them? Are they fighting you every step of the way? They drive, whether they want to believe it or not, the administration out of this room, they drive their punishment. Like Shaun was easy, there was no punishment with Shaun, he came for help. Pete was a little harder challenge, but it never rose to the level of discipline, but it was heading that way and he knew it. We believe in giving him a chance, but we do have another officer here. We haven't had a problem with him yet, but you can see it coming. But he's that obstinate officer who's going to dictate, he's going to be treated differently than both of these guys, just because of past history and everything else. So you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. So it's a great question, but it's a hard question to answer.
It's a tough, go ahead, Pete.
I'm sorry. And like he says, it is on a big case-to-case basis. But I truly think, and I do this with peer support, and I'll give you the example. Someone comes to me and says, Pete, I'm struggling, this, that, another thing. Okay, I go to the peer support coordinator and I say, hey, can you I need you to get this guy at least 1 or 2 days off, so we can work on some things. Now, if I'm going to do that, I'm holding you accountable. You have to be held accountable for your actions. So we're gonna give you the 1 or 2 days to help figure shit out. But it's not those 1 or 2 days that you're just sitting home and drinking and doing whatever and going to barbecues and stuff like that. Because guess who's coming to check on you? There's gonna be somebody from peer support, because we're giving you those 2 days to hold you accountable to get your shit in order. Do you need to find a therapist? Do you need help? Whatever it is. So I agree with it. We dictate to discipline. So okay, I'm gonna give you this to help you, but you're being held accountable. So do the work. You gotta do the work. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah. We are just running up against time here. We're at 12, but we had 2 more questions. What I'd like for you guys to do is to stay on and to respond to the answers to the questions here, and just type them in if you can. But one of the questions, essentially, I just want to paraphrase them really fast, is, are we doing these presentations like we do in academies, in annual training, in recall trainings? This is so important, right? I know we haven't done it for Danbury, Connecticut PD. I haven't been part of it anyway, but maybe it has happened. But that's a good thing, I think. When you think about how we always try to reach people far away, but are we doing it at home, right? I know that we do it in Connecticut because we started doing this with our peer support training, which I think is very beneficial. We have another one coming up in the next month in Newington. But are you doing it in your own academies is the question.
Should be done.
Right? Yeah. Next one here is, and I'll have you guys attend to this in the chat, but you know, some officers are afraid of confiding in administration because they still work in environments where their administration is not like Danbury, where it is punitive, and they don't know how to get help. So the question that I want you guys to respond to in the chat, or we could stay on, we could chat about it, is how do you change the culture of a department from an administration level to be able to think like you guys have, in a productive way to take care of the officers first, as opposed to punitive structures?
I will say that a lot of people have the wrong opinion of their department. I know I got sober, I got promoted, I became deputy chief, and I had officers come up to see me in my office and say, hey, Smith's got a problem. We want to get him help, but we don't want him to get screwed, because we know if we tell you that he's got a problem, so we can't tell you. And I'd say, you guys realize that I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic in recovery, and this job helped me. They didn't screw me. I'm a personal example. Do you really think that if you tell me that Smith needs help and I go see Smith and say, we're going to get you help, then we're going to throw, you know, I don't know of us firing anybody. I've been a cop for 40 years. Like Pete, I was down at the NYPD back in 1984. I used to hear about the farm. That's where they sent cops from the NYPD. It still exists. So back then, they would send you to the farm and you could come back. You got 2 trips to the farm. The 3rd trip, you would go again, but you would lose your job. It's not about, that's just one of those, what's the word I'm looking for, that cliches? The fallacies of the job is that, oh, you're gonna get screwed. No, because the administration also knows, we look at what we're doing with telling our stories and how much money you're saving by keeping me on the job versus having to hire somebody. Look at the economics of it, right? Sometimes, so I do think, yes, there are departments where the bosses are, you know, are not. Mike specified our previous chief had 2 bad problems out west in Wisconsin, so he did not have a good outlook on people with alcohol problems. But I think that's the rarity, not the commonality.
I know we're running out of time, but my suggestion to that question is, it does start from the ground up. If you have somebody like a Pete who has the trust and the confidence of the higher ups through the rank, you start building those relationships little by little. Like you said, you have an easy ground ball kind of peer support problem, and we need to get somebody this, and you can show the administration that what you're doing is working. And as the bigger problems come up, it's building the trust between your peer and your chief. And you might have to take those little steps to show them that we are responsible for what we're asking for and what we're doing, and that the program is working. So it's gonna be a time thing with those chiefs who are reluctant to do the kind of things that we do here. But I think by over time, with a year or two, and showing that you can work together, we're always honest with each other. And sometimes people come up to me like, Mike, hey, listen, this guy asked for this, but I really don't think he needs it. I think he's just gaming for a day off on a weekend. I trust Pete 100%. So when he comes up to me, he says, hey, Mike, this guy went through some shit. You know, it's his third dead baby call. He has a newborn at home. He's kind of messed up. Can we give him a few days off? If Pete asks me, yeah, Pete, no problem. Because he's told me the other way also. So it's building trust from the bottom up to the top.
Yeah.
And then just to real quickly, you know, it comes back to peer support, right? So you have your peer support, and you have a peer support team, you have a coordinator, you have a psychologist involved, and then it goes up. We call it the chain of command, but it's just a chain going up. And then when it gets to a point where the deputy chief has to get involved, that becomes an administration thing. That's the final thing, right? But I can go to my coordinator and ask for, you know, hey, this needs to happen. Can you make this happen? I really feel this and this, that. Yeah, I build the trust because I believe in the peer support team. I believe in the guys that I work with. And I believe people who are above rank of me. And the thing is this, you have to have a policy too. You have that policy and you sit with the higher ups and you say, hey, this is what's gonna have to happen. We're not asking for, you know, we're not asking to take everything, but when we need something, we wanna give it. And we're giving it, and we'll document it. Yeah, we gave him 2 days off. It's there in the schedule, whatever. You could put a reason why, but you're also holding us accountable too, right? And it's a team effort. It's a department effort, and you're gonna see that once you build that family team effort, you're gonna have a better outcome.
Yeah, you know, in the judicial system, there is something called essentially a deferred sentencing or deferred, prosecution. And we don't oftentimes think about utilizing that internally, but if you had a chart or something saying, hey, look, Pete, this is where we're at. These are the things that actually will go into your chart if we don't fix these things. Like thinking outside the box is a good thing, and grabbing from other professions for how we could, help our members is really important.
And Darren, it's not always giving somebody a day off. My deputy at the time, when he came to me and he goes, Shaun, he goes, the one thing I know is that your problem is not here. I need you back at work. I don't want you sitting at home for a couple of days with nothing to do. Yeah. So it depends, once again, it depends upon the person.
Well, and I know that Mike will beat me up if I don't share this with the group for whoever is still on and didn't go for lunch already and said, I'm out of this place. But I'll tell you, last time we were training peer support in Connecticut, 1 or 2 times ago, we had a student that showed up on the last day late to class, and he was about 2.5 hours late to class. And it was not like how he had been functioning through the rest of the week as a student. There's a 40-hour class that we teach. And so we knew him over the course of the week, and he shows up and he says, and he sits down in class, and I said, hey, let's go talk outside. And so he says, I said, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? Right? I didn't start with, why are you late? That would be a whole different tone, right? Hey, what's going on, man? Everything going okay? And he says, I had about 4 or 5 shots of alcohol before riding my motorcycle over here today. And I wasn't going to come, but I need help. And when you think about the impact of what that means for somebody to confide in you, that's how their life is going right now, we all could be that person that has that listening ear by asking the right question, which is, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? As opposed to, why are you late? Or start with a punitive question. Like just changing that verbiage is so important, So I encourage everybody to do this stuff. Gentlemen, if you could stay on and respond to this stuff in the chat, that would be great. I am going to see you guys next month, and I'm always grateful for your friendship. We call ourselves the CTAS boys, the Connecticut, Arizona contingency. We're great friends, and I love you guys. So thank you.
I see Tava on there and Sarita on there. So hello ladies.